Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show, it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Big Sky. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, we're picking up where the last episode left off with Lindor's situation. I was like, oh, please don't let nothing happen to my boy Lindor. I was like, no. And then luckily he didn't find anything, but I also didn't trust Wolf and his wife not to do something regardless. But look, I was like, the moment he's like, oh no, like, when you looking for something, came on my property with no warrant. But it's like, no, we got nothing to hide. And the moment he locked Lindor in, I'm like, he does have his gun, so that probably doesn't benefit you. But he's like, no, like, the fact is, I within my right to defend myself. You're just casually walking on my property without permission. You're trespassing. So I wanted to show you I could do something in a harmless way. Not funny, but harmless. I'm like, that, you're trying to, like, play the role of innocent. You would think you wouldn't do that. I mean, to be fair, your brother was on some, like, weird crap like that, and that's how he got busted, because he, just like Cassie, just had the wrongest, like, had a wrong feeling about him, and she was right, and Lindor's got that same instinct. I mean, I'm actually sure that's probably why Cassie was like, oh yeah, about that instinct. She probably is telling Lindor to trust it, because it's like, well, I mean, you don't want to say it, but you know, Rick was his twin, so maybe the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Well, I guess this is another apple on the tree that's very similar to the apple that fell. I butchered it. I don't know. I was trying to make the comparison because that made it sound like a father-son thing when it is actually a brother thing, and I don't think the analogy of apple falling far from the tree is applicable in that particular regard. That's why I was trying to change the metaphor, but I butchered my attempt to, like, shift it to fit what I was trying to say. Regardless, I need to shut up. The point is that I just thought it was, I was just glad that my boy was able to walk away alive. I was like, good. Because I was too worried that, I was like, are we going to have a Cody situation here? I was like, nah, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it like that. Luckily, they didn't do it like that. Poor Ronald, I guess he was faking it because he saw this as an opportunity the moment Wolf's wife, like, knocked him out, but made it seem like he had died. In the process, like, Scarlett kind of struck in action, like, yo, like, don't hurt him, and got a piece of wood slapped across her face, so. But it turned out Ronald was playing possum, and he tried to attack. I was about to say, oh, is Wolf about to get it? Especially because his wife had dropped the remote. I was like, oh, this ain't good. But she ended up picking it up. But I thought the fact is they made a point to show, like, it got slid somewhere else. I thought they were going to use that to their advantage. But during the whole scuffle, like, Scarlett, like, backed down because she thought something had happened to Ronald before. So she was scared. But now it's like, oh, he's okay. So, but obviously, Ronald gets put in his place. Which, since we're on that train, let's go ahead and continue down that conversation with Scarlett talking to Ronald that even now he's still trying to make his escape. But, you know, for Scarlett, it's like, right, if I do anything wrong, I'm not going to be able to see my daughter. But it's like, no, like, where is your daughter, by the way? And it's like, no, they said she's somewhere on the property, like, you know, taken care of, and if I'm good and stuff. It's like, yeah, but they're lying to you. Like, the fact is that, you know, her motherly instincts, like, she kind of gotten beaten down by Wolf and his wife, and, you know, her daughter being used as leverage too just kind of made the control and, you know, what they had planned and what they're trying to do to her that much easier. But, you know, Ronald is telling her, like, yeah, it's worth, like, you know, trying and failing than doing nothing but staying here. Because she was even saying, like, you know, it was a marshal that you were trying to turn yourself into. He was like, yeah, but I escaped from him before, so I could do it again. Because I'd rather be handcuffed by that marshal and taken in than be stuck in this prison like some animal, you know, so. Scarlett did come upon them having a conversation where it seems like Wolf's main intention of doing this, because in his own weird way, he thinks he's saving the world because he's trying to take his principles from how he basically makes an animal obedient and breaks some of their bad habits. He's trying to apply that to people. Like, I thought he was doing it because, like, oh, I got to make it up to the Legarsky name by, like, getting Ronald to reform. But I'm like, why don't you just turn him in? Wouldn't that be enough? But it's like, no, he wants to make a name for himself. Like, he'll erase all the evil that his brother did because it's like, they'll write this book I've got, like, my, the person who's offering him the book deal and stuff like that. It's like, right, they finally kind of jumped in the idea, and it's like, if I do this, like, it'll get rid of all the criminals. Like, we'll find a means of actually, like, breaking them of their bad habits. So he wants, in his own way, he's like looking at what he's doing as altruistic, and by being like, oh, I'm the one that was able to properly rehabilitate and cure criminals and this, even the hardest of criminals, and that in itself will restore the Logarski name. It's like, you're going wide for this, but Scarlett did overhear the conversation, and they finally did tell her the truth of like, right, okay, so your daughter's not actually here, she's with my wife's sister, so it's like, yeah, she's on it, and now Scarlett's like, okay, I appreciate it, and she's like, okay, can I go see her? It's like, no, after your last attempt, you don't earn that right. It's like, which is BS, because obviously she's been on her best behavior, told you everything, done everything you asked, but now it's like this one slip up sets it all back. It's like, no, like the goal was always going to be out of reach. Now the question is, would they have ever let her go back to her daughter after she had been rehabilitated, or would they have lumped her in with the whole, probably after they dealt with Ronald, then like, oh, she's in a good enough state, we can get her away from, and she could go back to her daughter. It's hard to say what their true intentions would have been on that point, but she knows, like, right, you're going to keep moving the goalposts, so she decides to help Ronald, and I like that her darker nature starts coming in, because once again, like, when you met her initially, you wouldn't have known that she was who she was, and then you spend enough time around Ronald, you're like, oh, she's not an innocent person you think she is, that she's just as dark and twisted as Ronald in certain points, but she just, even when she releases Ronald, she's got to stay here, because it's like, no, you go ahead, actually, you go get my daughter, I'll stay here, and once I know my daughter's safe, I'm gonna leave, because it's like, right, if we do something now, if they find out I'm responsible helping you break out, I'm never gonna see my daughter again. So, but he's like, what are you gonna do? Because it's like, oh, do you trust me? He's like, I do now, I did have doubts before, and she like slaps him, and she's like, do you love me? And he was like, yes, forever and ever. She's like, good. And like I said, she's starting to slip back into her dark, like, yeah, like, oh, I was pretending to be something I'm not, let me flex my evil muscles again. And it's like, wow, the terrible twosome just kind of came back to their senses. They woke up from the haze they've been under. Well, at least Scarlett has. So she's excited, because she's like, oh, I got a plan. I'm like, oh, it's going to be something devilish. I mean, obviously we know what her last plan was that helped out with the whole Ronald thing. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I do not think it's going to end well for Wolf. Hopefully for Wolf, that Lindor and, well, mainly it's just going to be Lindor, finds his way back there to help you, because I get the feeling like you and your wife are going to walk away pretty dead in this situation. So, well, we'll see how it all plays out. But Ronald's on the loose. He's going to get Scarlett's daughter. Let's see if he takes any side tricks along the way. I doubt he is. I think he's all about his mission. And good luck to anyone that ends up getting in his way. So that's going to be interesting. But other than that, Jenny's dealing with the aftermath of Travis getting taken by Deidre, because she hasn't found him in anything. So she's working with Cassie to find him. She went all over the place. He doesn't have his phone, doesn't have his weapon, so she's scared for him. But ultimately, they stop by the bar. Because I saw this scene in the trailer, and now with it playing out, I'm like, and it's written like, oh, liar and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, it's Smiley. I thought it was going to be his head, because that feels like the cartel move. But it makes sense, because it's almost like a very Hammurabi code type of thing. If you steal something, you're going to get your hand cut off. An eye for a hand for a hand, an eye for an eye type of thing. So it makes sense with the hand. Very old school in that regard. Like I said, I feel like the cartel thing typically would be the head, but it's like, yeah, I might be thinking to Ozark to Breaking Bad. But nevertheless. Smiley's hand with the pills, and I guess they still haven't recognized it because they haven't seen her hands enough, but we know that Ren has the 3 dots on her hand, so the entire episode was because I thought Cassie was going to run into her, she doesn't, but Jenny does, and I was like, I was thinking that Jenny was going to see that and be like, oh, 3 dots on your hand, just like on those pills, but it didn't come up, but that might be a link soon enough, a link in that particular chain, but obviously having to call it in. There is a situation I thought was kind of a very interesting development with the whole Tanya and Dono thing and Ren. Just first and foremost, like Tanya helping dispose of the rest of Smiley's body. I'm like, wow. I mean, you're cartel people, so it makes sense, but you went full Bay Harbor Butcher on this situation, but I'm like, once again, you're cartel, so it kind of makes sense. But Tanya being like, it's just like, he's like, oh, watch out for the blood, and she's like, he's basically like, this could have been your body, so you should be grateful, like, this could have easily have been you, but also it's like, right, did you get the right badge? Because this feels like she's like, no, I got everything you had. They didn't have monkey notebooks, but I got you, he's like, a horse will do, but next time, I prefer monkeys. I'm like, Dono, I don't know. You're a weirdo and I love you. I love this weird cartel. It seems like Jack's just going to be the straight man in this situation, but Ren and Dono have got their own little comedy team on, and I'm like, I love these guys. They're not going to survive this season, but I wish they would because I want them around forever because I love them. I love their dynamic. And you throw in Tanya in the mix and stuff like that. It's so good. Because Tanya came to Ren about an idea. She's like, right, you know, it's something in a binder and stuff like that. And she's like, yeah, I want to buy some land, some property. And I love that, like, Ren went on that whole diatribe of, like, I was like, yeah, like my dad would say, not good enough about my grades, my posture, my piano lessons. She's like, Tanya's like, oh my God, you took piano too? Me too. And it's like, she was like, yeah, but like show tunes and stuff like that. And, you know, Ren was like, my situation was more Chopin, but, you know, whatever, get to the point you were making. And she talked about, in the moment she's like, oh yeah, I'm going to buy a ranch. I was like, whoa, I love that. I'm like, because I was like, what? They brought that up with the whole Cassie and her dad thing. I was like, oh, is that going to become a bigger thing? Oh yeah, it is. It's going to put them in close proximity to each other. Luckily, Tanya's handling all of that, but obviously we'll get to it. But Jenny runs into her with Ren, so that's a whole thing. But I love that whole thing of like, oh, Dono, do you have anything to give to me? And it's like, he's like, no. And she's like, oh, well, look at Tanya over here getting work done. But Dono like the last phone call was to a lawyer. And I was like, oh, what lawyer was he talking to? Why would, and it's like, oh, it's Bridger's dad. Or dad or his mom, like, or maybe both of them. But it's like, right. I was like, I'm pretty sure the last person you talked to was them. So, because obviously it'd be like Madison, but I guess like they're still teenagers, so it's probably under their family's plan. So like it probably like connects to their family's name and not their name, whatever the case, or not unless they were, I don't know, whatever the case may be. So it's kind of like, oh, what was our boy, what was our dirty cop Harvey up to if he was talking to a lawyer, you know? But it is interesting, like, the Tanya and Dono conversations, too, because it's like, oh, hey, like, oh, basically, it's like, oh, you're worried about Ren. She's going to be okay. He's like, don't talk about stuff you don't understand. Once again, like, the Dono and Ren thing is actually super cute. But I love that Tanya was talking to him about, like, right, like, do you like killing people? And he's like, you know, I'm good at it. And she's like, well, since I'm working for Ren now, would I have to kill people? And he's like, probably should have asked that question before you signed up for this. But then Jack shows up, and poor Dono, he gets no respect. He's like, oh, what's up, Jack? And he puts out his fist, and then, like, Jack's like, no, I don't know where that hand's been, buddy. And then the other guy, his right-hand guy, I guess, like, Jack's equivalency to Dono's, like, and Dono's like, oh, he gets big brother super hard because the guy, like, pimp slaps him to the ground, and it's like, dude, it feels so bad for Dono. Dono's like this, you know, lovable oaf, and he just gets bullied in that moment. And Jack's like, okay, so where's my sister? Who just, well, earlier, like I said, obviously the rant situation is something Cassie's dad's all about, but she's also enjoying it too because she gets to see Kai happy in a way that she hasn't really seen in a while. So the ranch is good, but it gets complicated because not only do they have competition, turns out that competition's Tanya, and it's like, well, what are you doing? It's like, oh, I'm kind of an assistant, almost like an executive position, but it's like, yeah, my boss, blah, 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 and you're like, okay. So they're gonna, eventually she's gonna end up talking to Jenny because Jenny ended up talking to Diedrich, which I got to circle back to Dietrich thing later on, but I'll get to it in a second. She talks to Dietrich about Smiley, and he points her towards Ren because he knows, like, if anyone's going to do it. Because he's trying to be like, yeah, I had no idea what my nephew was up to. Because I think he's probably biting the bullet and believing, like, right, if he had the drugs, that most likely means that he probably thinks Smiley is the one who took them. It's like, right, he didn't order that, and, you know, again, that was Sam, but everything's falling on his shoulders because of Travis, so... Poor bastard. I don't think he feels too bad about it. Because, like you said, it was self-preservation. So, I mean, you're saving yourself by selling them some douchebag. It's not like Smiley was a good guy anyway. He's just as much mixed up in this. So, it's like, if you have to sacrifice someone, I guess it's justification. Why not sacrifice another bad guy? Poor bastard got it super hard, though. But regardless, that sends Jenny and her partner, and I love that he's just running his mouth, because he's like, oh, shouldn't we have backup or something like that? And Jenny looks at him, he's like, right, shut up. But it's just like, it's like the cartel, Gatling guns, he expects like to be a big shootout, and it's random. Like, dude, I love Davina Gavankar so much, dude. I love her in this role, dude. She's so, because I love that the innocent, like, what? Oh my god, you think I'm tired? She's like, no, I'm in like the real estate, I'm in the property business. Like, yeah. And it's like, oh, well, if you really, you know, if you think I'm a part of, like, kidnapping and slaughtering and stuff like that, like, yeah, come back to me. But it's like, yeah, I have no idea, like, who this Stone guy is either. I have no idea, like, who it is you're getting this information from. It's like, you know, not unless you guys want to cuff me, or guys are going to cuff me. And then she looks at him, and he kind of looks at her, and she's like, do you want to cuff me? And he's just like, even I'm like, oh, dude. That's a line that's going to catch you off guard, because it's like, she's so coy, because it's like, yeah, that's a dangerous woman because she's cartel related, but it's also kind of like the fact that she's flirty and kinky like that too. You're just kind of like, I don't know what to feel in this moment. I love it. And so, like, he's just like, yeah, I don't know. I got a bad feeling, but she definitely feels cartel related. So it's there. Like I said, the moment Jenny and Cassie get to talk, it's going to be a conversation of, oh yeah, I saw Tanya. Really? Yeah, she's buying that property. She's working for Ren. Diedrich gave me the information that that she's carteling. It's like, wait, so it's like, yeah, that's definitely going to be interesting. And it's like, yeah, and Tanya works for her? It's like, yeah. Because Jenny bumped into her there too, so it's like, yeah, it's like, oh, no wonder she lied to us. Because that's the thing, you're working for the people. Well, I was about to say, I have to take that back. To be fair, I mean, you had Walter and Jesse doing the exact same thing. Marty's doing the exact same thing. Granted, Wendy kind of doubled down on Marty being forced into that thing, but regardless, it's like, yeah, everyone kind of gets stuck, you know, but it's just like, no one typically volunteers to work with the people that were kidnapping you and threatening to kill you. But for her, it's like, when you have lemons, make lemonade, because it's like, this is the best prospect. Like, I wasn't living before, now I'm actually living a life, because she was just a waitress, and now it's like she has greater prospects in her life of like, oh yeah, when you're mixed up in a cartel, like, you're part of something bigger, there's a lot more money rolling your way, and like, yeah, but there's a high chance of death and you committing murder and you dying by either getting mixed up in like a shootout with police, or you just straight up spending the rest of your life in prison. But I guess for her, she's willing to take those chances. But, you know, it's like, I think it's the thing of like, oh, she's a small town girl that's just looking for her chance, even if that chance takes her down the route of the criminal world. I guess they're almost kind of doing a Scarlet thing there, because I would have never thought they would have taken Tanya down the road, lace route, because like I said, the entire time I'm looking like, Jamie Lynn Sigler, how could you be so evil? Or at the very least, I was about to say morally questionable, but I guess morally, you haven't killed anyone yet, so it is a morally questionable route you're on. But how could you do this, Jamie Lynn Sigler? How could you do that? But nevertheless, so there's that side of things. Speaking of Ren, she did catch she stopped by the house to find out stuff, but I knew at the same time Bridger was taking out trash. I was like, oh, you're going to see him, aren't you? Sadly, he's not going to see you. And in that moment, she's like piecing it together, like, oh, you kid, you must have something to do with all of this in some shape or form. Now, what role you play in this? You just happen to show up at the crime scene where the truck was, where I was, because I had vested interest there. You must have vested interest too. So I don't know whether Ren's fully pieced it together, but she knows Bridger's in the middle of this. So yeah, trouble just found its way back to your door yet again. So. Also, Cassie and Jenny, like, none of that stuff looking, I guess, like, maybe the prince didn't come back yet about the Harper thing, because Cassie was looking into it, but I guess it didn't come back yet. So we haven't, like, she hasn't connected the dots yet in that regard, but I'm assuming the next episode she will or something, but. Okay, so other than that, we had Dietrich not knowing the whole thing about Smiley, so he's like, right, he was waiting for Smiley, and he's like, right, let's go to Smiley's place. And when they get there and there's blood everywhere, he thinks Travis did something, but sadly, your boy T-Lock picked the god-awful worst time to show up. He literally showed up like a minute before and he pulled a Lee from the Walking Dead Telltale game, slipping on some blood. It's like, oh boy. And he tried to hide. Luckily, he got out of there without them seeing his face, but they probably, like, saw his license plate, was able to track it down. Well, they were able to, like, they immediately got in their car afterwards and speed after him. I mean, they were in a public area because there's, like, a park right nearby. I think the calm and collected thing, I know you're nervous, but in that moment, he should have just casually gotten in his car and just sat there for a bit. Just be like, pretend you're doing something. Do. I had to stop myself. I was literally about to sing the Rick Glassman, do, bobbity boo, from Tyso, Take Your Shoes Off. I was about to like bump into that, because like you can't start that without having to go all the way, but I'm not going to go all the way with it. I'll do that like after I stop the recording. But it's just like, I think it'll be in your best interest to like have laid low in your car or something. But it's like, yeah, the longer you're in the area, the more likely something happens. I mean, they still found you regardless. So, tripped you, bashed you in the head with a bat. If I was him, I would have been like, no, I was trying to buy drugs from Smiley. It's like, what? But Dietrich ended up finding out stuff regardless. So, and Travis sends Ginny this very cryptic message of like, right, if things don't go, just know I'm okay. And it's like, oh, sounds like he knows like this is going to be a bad route. So he's taking T-Lock somewhere, and it's like a underground thing. There's like almost like an underground bunker type of thing. And part of me is like, that's if I had to assume, and maybe that's like the safe house where where he comes in to like debrief for under like cover stuff, or it's supposed to be like a safe house type of thing. Because I don't think he's going to kill T-Lock. The sad twisted thing is it'd probably be better for Max and her mom, maybe, but especially because T-Lock screwed the pooch on this. I mean, he let this all play. Like he in his own complicated way helped kind of sell Travis's story about Smiley being the one that's got the drugs and stuff like that. I mean, to be fair, they found out after they had already killed him, so they didn't know for sure. They just know that Travis like sold him out. So we'll see whether that ends up being the case or not, whether like that is like the whole underground situation of this is where the undercover work, like the headquarters, or at the very least a place for Travis to go to. So they're going to try and get T-Lock out of the picture, because they're probably going to make it seem like he killed T-Lock just so that Dietrich still believes him and he's able to keep his cover. So we'll see. But I guess it's also like Travis knows like he came close to dying because of that. So he wanted to open up like, right, like, because he might have to disappear after this. Like whether it's just like oh man, I might die because we are mixing it with the cartel, or it could be like, right, when this all gets settled, I'm going to be moving on and getting closer to the big picture, the cartel. So I probably won't be in Montana so there's probably elements of all of that. So we'll see how which route that goes down. But we had Harper go to Bridger and Madison's house with our Mr. Query, we found out his name, who doesn't want the police involved, because if the police are involved, it's going to be what he's up to, because he did inadvertently kill a cop, even if it was a dirty cop, but he also knows the kids are going to be in danger, and so obviously they want to help out as best they can, but they can't take him to a hospital. It turns out the reason why he's going all like helping them, because I was like, is he like Harper's dad or something? Like, what's going on there? It's like, no. It turns out his son drowned like some time ago, and like because they're aware of they saw his son, and it's like, right, this guy is Sam's. I think that was his son's name, and it was like, oh, like this is his dad, and it's like, yeah, like that's why he's trying to protect him, because he blames himself, like, I couldn't protect my son. So I don't know if it's a thing of like he just kind of lives on the streets now. Maybe just things, he kind of fell apart after his son died, and the moment he found out these kids were in danger, he wanted to protect them. It's like, I couldn't protect my own son, so I'm gonna protect other people's kids. Like, I'm not gonna let like some parent go through the tragedy that I went through. So interesting timing too, because I was just thinking about something. I just brought up T-Lock. I just happened to like have the TV like turned to USA Network, and it just happens to be an episode of I think Chicago PD, where the actor who plays T-Lock is in it. I was like, oh, it's interesting, because it was like right before I started. I watched Big Sky, so I just thought that was kind of interesting. But aside from that, Madison did get all they need from this guy Pete, which I'm like, they call him Hot Pete, but I wonder is anything going to come about that, because it's like, oh, you're getting all this stuff because his dad's a doomsday prepper, and you're like, is that going to be so? Because you never know what's going to be significant and what's not, whether that's going to end up coming back in a bigger way than you would expect, like the freaking ranch thing. I was like, I knew they were doing something with it, I just didn't expect this to be the situation. But like I said, the moment Tanya mentioned a new ranch, I was like, yeah. But regardless, they were able to get what they need to take care of Mr. Query while also lying to Bridger and Madison's parents who came home early. So, yeah, let's cover up the fact is we've got a guy downstairs bleeding crazily while we ended up patching him up the best we can to hide all our involvement in this, which everything's going to come to a head sooner or later with Ren already hot on your trails because she knows Bridger's involved in this to some extent. So many moving pieces. I was almost about to skip a pretty important moment. We had Lindor and Cassie. It sounded like Lindor was wires being crossed and stuff like that. I guess because he's I'm feeling the way I am, and I thought we were taking a step forward, but maybe you don't want to. But then she kisses him, and then he kind of hesitates, and she's like, what? And he's like, no, it's not. And then they proceed to make out. So I don't know if that's the Jerry situation, whether that's still a thing or not, because Jerry's like, oh, could we have, would we have ever worked, as a couple or whatever? I don't know if that's a situation or, that's going to come back up when Jerry comes back, or whether it's just kind of that was kind of a goodbye kiss of, right, I'm going to figure things out at home, but also, yeah, I accept that this is all we will be as friends. I don't know if whether that's what was kind of causing that hesitation in Lindor, or was it just him, because he was about to take a step back because he was wondering oh, maybe this isn't right. It's not right for me and you because our situations are complicated. Me working the Ronald thing, you wanted to not get involved in it. My feelings for you, I've made it pretty obvious, and you're taking things slow. But then you're talking about we can, things were kind of very steady, and then now it's now we then Cassie said no, we can't start moving slow, and she started slowly bringing the walls down. So we'll see how that all plays out. Based on a preview, which I managed to catch glimpses of, but it seems like the next episode is the winter finale, which I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. This show, even last season did that, but I think that might just be a lot of pandemic reasons. Well, this particular case, I know. Well, that's definitely the protocols and stuff like that probably plays a big role in how they go about filming stuff in certain chunks and stuff like that. Because I know other networks like the CW, for example, typically film stuff 5 episodes out. They always try to stay at least 5 episodes ahead or something like that. So it's kind of something of that nature, or whether it's just because I think around this time would have just been the natural stopping point anyway, because the winter time is when stuff starts going on their breaks, because there's a lot of stuff already at that point, and some stuff is coming up on that point. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what the winter finale has in store for us as we hit essentially what is a midway point of the season. I'm assuming this season is going to be 16, was last season 16 or was it 18? I don't remember now. I think it was 15, wasn't it? Whatever the case may be. I'm interested to see where everything takes us going forward. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.